everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unlimited Limited, the show where we work together to get better at limited environments in Star Wars Unlimited. So today we've got a bit of a fun one. There are 6 sets out for Star Wars Unlimited as of me recording this video, and I've drafted all of them, and I've genuinely had a blast with every single one of them. And I thought it would be fun to rank how I felt that the different sets were in a limited context. Of course, this video will be very different in a constructed context, but look at the channel name. If you want constructed, go check out someone else. Although, I might make some constructed videos soon. Who knows? Depends how these PQs go. Before we get into it, I thought it'd be fun to do like a pack one, pick one scenario for Secrets of Power because I'm practicing for PQs that are coming up. And I'm going to be doing that using draftswoo.com, which you can get access to on my Patreon. Go check it out. All right, so it looks like there is... we have our choice between Luthen, Deidre, and Mon Mothma. I think for draft, Mon Mothma is really good. All 3 of these leaders are actually quite good. It's also guaranteed that we're going to be past a Jabba. The person to our left has opened 2 Jabbas, so we're going to get at least one of those. So I'm happy to take Mon Mothma here, grab Jabba, and 3PO, sure. So we're going to try to play one of these too, although 3PO is... he's not great. He really isn't. But, you know, he's not unplayable. But definitely, we're going to try to do these 2. So I won't waste your time with a whole draft right now. But we're just going to think about pack one, pick one, and how we would make the decision. So we're going to be looking at officials, and then we're going to be looking at cool synergies with Jabba, because there is some of that. So let's start with the Elite Squad. This is actually pretty decent Jabba synergy. The problem is it's an 8 drop, so probably not going to end up taking it. Also, it's not either of these colors, and that's fine. Obviously, we can play a red base, but it's usually a little bit safer to start in a color that you know you're going to be playing, because what if it turns out that yellow is open, right? And then we're playing Jabba yellow, but we have this, right? Soulless one also is fine, but it doesn't really scream synergy for either of the leaders. This card I don't think is very good for draft when has become now. Creditor's Claim is actually very good. This card is very strong. It's great to put on a leader. It's in Jabba colors. So currently I think Creditor's Claim is a contender. Just the fact that like it makes your leader bigger, and then when they do finally manage to kill your leader, it's still 2-for-1s on death. Like that's pretty crazy. And it's probably, I say 2-for-1s, it's probably gotten a lot more than 2-for-1. Creditor's Claim, weirdly also, it's an upgrade, but it's like kind of one of the best pieces of removal in the set. So definitely high on Creditor's Claim. The downside being that it is a villainy card as well, which means that we're, obviously we're not like locked Jabba, but you know, it really pushes us towards Jabba. And then if villainy is not open, we might just not play it. Reckless Rebel is filler, so is Enforcer Squadron. Relief Request is, you don't want stuff that just doesn't affect the board, right? Healing your base or healing a unit and doing nothing else for an entire card and 2 resources. I'm not interested. Now, Naboo Security Force, on the other hand, this is very good for decks that want to go a bit later. It actually does go pretty well in the Jabba deck, just because it's a big Sentinel and it will probably survive damage, and it comes out the turn after Jabba does. So, and since Jabba flips and is 8, it's going to be difficult for them to kill him that turn. So next turn, you just slam this down, boom. It's going to be very difficult for your opponent to deal with that value. So definitely very high on this. Supreme Council Aid is, it's like good filler. This is bad filler. Armor of Fortune is okay, but it's not our pick here. Let's Call It War is also some of the best removal in the set, but once again, I'd like to start on one of these colors if possible, unless there's like a very massive differential in the aspect, which there isn't here. And then this card is fine, but once again, and Diplomatic Envoy is also okay. So for me, this is really between Creditor's Claim and Naboo Security Force. And between the 2, I just think Creditor's Claim is so, like, removal is so, like, good removal is so rare in this set. And this is that, as well as also good against a leader. And then this is like a little bit of a draft tip for you guys. If you're ever in doubt between 2 cards, and I'm not really, I'm on Creditor's Claim here, but if you ever are in doubt, taking the rarer one is like sometimes the right thing to do, just because you're more likely to see this coming around. So I will take Creditor's Claim as my first pick. Looks like we might get one as a second pick too, but I won't do anything past that. If you want to draft on your own against bots that are getting smarter whenever I program them to get smarter, check it out, draftswoo.com. Join the Patreon. Anyway, let's get into the actual video. So let's get into this tier list. So a couple of notes before we start. I did come from Magic the Gathering. I played Magic Draft for many years. I never went to like any major tournaments, but I went to a decent amount of smaller ones. I really enjoyed that experience. I always enjoyed playing on Arena as well, and chatting with my friends about strategies and looking at 17 lands data and listening to draft podcasts. These are all very fun. I played Constructed Magic too a little bit, but not near as much. I was so much on the limited formats for Magic. I play a lot more Constructed Star Wars than I do Magic. A lot of how I evaluate what I think is like good in a set is going to be more informed from Magic than it is from Star Wars, just because I've been drafting Magic longer than I've been drafting Star Wars, although recently I've been doing more Star Wars. The other thing about Magic that is different than Star Wars is that it's sort of it's a lot more polar in Star Wars. So there are some genuinely very bad Magic draft sets. Sets that I just don't enjoy drafting, and that there's sort of a general community consensus that they're very poor experiences to draft. Star Wars, I don't really think has that. There are definitely sets that I would say are stronger than other sets for draft, but I think all of the sets are at least okay in Star Wars. Whereas, the examples I put here are Phyrexia Obi-Wan Foundations, Omen Paths, or the Spider-Man set, and Streets of New Capenna are all considered to be like pretty bad draft sets in the past few years. But Magic also does have some of the genuinely most fun draft experiences of all time. I personally really loved Dominaria United, Duskmorn, and then my favorite all-time draft format, March of the Machines. I think those were just incredible draft experiences, and I will do them every time I can. They are so much fun. So Magic is there are also some like okay formats for Magic, don't get me wrong. Lost Caverns of Ixalan I think was a fine format. Aether Drift was okay, Tarkir was okay. But there are some very good Magic draft sets and very bad Magic draft sets. Star Wars I think is a little bit less polar. It sort of just like sits kind of close together in the good section. There are none that make me go, oh, this is terrible. And there haven't been any like massive standouts like way better than the rest of the other ones yet either. When I'm talking in Star Wars context and I'm saying this is good, and it sounds like I'm calling all of them good, it's because from my experience they are. I would be happy to draft every set that is out of Star Wars so far. There have been none where I'm like, oh, okay, I've drafted that a few times, I'm done with that, I don't want to do that anymore. Every set I would like to draft still, whereas that's not the case in Magic. So while I do have my preferences within Star Wars, just understand that I do think all of them are good. There's one Magic one I forgot to mention, which is Vintage Cube, which is actually the secret hidden best format of all time for Limited. Vintage Cube is very good. I don't think we have that in Star Wars yet, but I just don't think it's old enough to have the sort of card depth in order to make something like Vintage Cube, but maybe one day. So a little bit more about how I'm going to judge draft sets. What I consider to be a good set, and again, I'm being informed by Magic here somewhat, is things like opportunities for synergies. In my favorite Magic set of all time, March of the Machines, one of the things I liked about it the most is that there were all these really crazy synergies. I'm going to be mentioning March of the Machines a lot in this video, so just be ready for that. I really like that draft format. There were all these cool synergies in that set where there are all these like kind of bad cards where if you, just played them on their own without like a plan in mind, they just kind of didn't really do much. But if you built them in like these synergies, they could really be the glue that would like completely hold your deck together. For any Magic heads, the combo I'm specifically thinking of now is the interaction between Halo Charged Scab and Unsealed Necropolis, which was just like neither of those cards on their own were particularly good, but if you were able to put together kind of a control-y deck that made use of both of them, you could easily just win a ton of games with that. And it doesn't need to be a grindy synergy like that. It can be like a more aggro-y synergy too. But I like opportunities for people to play cards that aren't just like, this is a good card, but play a card with a plan. And that plan usually needs to be constructed in the deck building and drafting phase of the night. And that's what I mean when I say opportunities for synergies here. And that is also, to go to my next point here, the thing I really like is when bold picks in deck building are rewarded, but greedy deck building is punished. So what I mean by that is that there is kind of a there needs to be kind of a balance. So again, talking about Magic, there was a set not too long ago called Bloomborough. Good set, fine draft set. I enjoyed it. But the draft set, it was very straightforward. You picked a type of creature. So say you wanted to do rabbits, and then you would draft every rabbit you saw, and that was your rabbits deck. It was very on rails, and it was fun. I enjoyed drafting Bloomborough. But if you tried to deviate from kind of one of the creatures, your deck would just kind of be measurably worse than if you didn't do that. I like finding opportunities to do a frogs deck, but like include this weird raccoon thing that kind of actually does make the frog part better. But maybe it wasn't expected or even anticipated to work like that. So that was, one thing that made Bloomborough a little bit less interesting to me, but again, still fun draft format. But there needs to be kind of a top limit to that. I'm all about color fixing. Okay, March of the Machine had incredible color fixing, and I think it did it perfectly. I think Dominaria United also had good color fixing, and that did it well. There's a set kind of recently, Tarkir Dragonstorm, which I felt maybe possibly for the first time in my long Magic draft career, the color fixing was maybe too good. People could did just make super greedy 5-color piles all the time. And I like super greedy 5-color piles. They're fun. But I think that you should need to work to get those and not just have them sort of thrown into your lap. I think if you're drafting a set and you're like, I'm just going to go 5-color without like a real plan, I think that you should probably, there should be some kind of punishment for not having that plan there. So, and that would be what I would consider greedy. But dialing that back a little bit, these sort of bold decisions of I want to throw a 3rd color splash into my 2-color deck because I think it'll make it better or whatever. Again, I'm using Magic terminology here. I think that kind of stuff should be rewarded. So the fixing should be good enough to allow for that, but not so good as to make it just like trivial to do. So bringing it to my 3rd point, I like it when a set is not too bomby unless interaction can keep up. A lot of draft people, and I won't fault them for this, will just say that they kind of just don't like bombs conceptually, right? Just like the idea that if your opponent just like drops a bomb on you, and by bomb I just mean like very good card, they just like drop a bomb on you that you didn't see during the draft portion and they did, that kind of feels unfair because they just like have a card that you didn't have the opportunity to get. And I get that perspective, especially in sealed. I get that perspective, but my gripe isn't so much with that. It's more whenever sets have a ton of bombs and don't have the interaction. So talking about March of the Machine again, it is a very bomby set. There are a lot of bombs in it, but also the interaction in that set was very, very strong. The counter spells were good. I know Swoo doesn't have counter spells, but the destroy effects were very good. Swoo does have those. And I understand that Swoo is trying to move away from kind of like event-based control and more toward combat and interaction and more towards unit-based control and action. And that's fine. Whatever method of interaction is settled on for Star Wars Unlimited, I think it needs to be strong enough to deal with any sort of heavy bomb format. I like bomby formats as long as, like I say, there's interaction for them. So that's one thing that I find quite valuable. In fact, I think formats that have like no bombs are kind of boring. No, I like bomby formats so long as there is interaction to keep up with those bombs. And then maybe not everyone who's listening to this has a history in Magic, so this one is very Swoo specific. I think leader balance is important. It is very unfortunate whenever you are at a draft and you kind of, you can, during the leader draft, you can do your best to make sure you get a couple of playable leaders, but sometimes you just don't have any good leaders after the leader draft, and there's nothing you could have done about it. And then before you even crack into the first pack, you already feel like you're just at a huge disadvantage. That's just going to be a feature of having leaders and whatnot, and I think that's fine, and I don't think that it should be, I don't think we should try to avoid, sometimes getting stronger or weaker leaders in a draft. But one thing that I like is not having 1, 2, or 3 leaders being just heads above the rest, where if you don't have those, you're just at a huge disadvantage. So we'll get into all that. All right, all that preamble done, let's get into the list. So at 6th place, I have Jump to Lightspeed. And I just want to reiterate going into this list, I enjoyed drafting Jump to Lightspeed. It is probably my least favorite set to draft, but I still did enjoy it quite a lot. I thought the set was really fun, but like I said, I've enjoyed drafting every Star Wars Unlimited set. They're all good. There have been no massively worse or massively better sets yet, in my opinion. Anyway, let's talk about the pros of Jump to Lightspeed really quick first. I thought indirect damage is a cool mechanic in draft and in constructed. It rewards sort of forward thinking, where like, you know, you have to go, okay, well, do I want to just leave my unit with 1 HP? What kind of like options are there for them to deal with that? You kind of have to think ahead with indirect damage, and I like that a lot. You know, can I actually afford to put 3 on my base? Like, what does that leave me at? Does that leave me at, like, you know, only 10 remaining life on my base? So they have a 5/5. Maybe I want to leave 11 remaining life on my base so that they can't 2-hit me, right? There's, like, all these kind of cool things you have to think about with indirect damage that I like a lot. I personally lost a game at a PQ that I'm quite embarrassed about because I put indirect damage that my opponent signed to me in a very stupid space. And that ended up losing me the game. And I realized as soon as I did it, I'm like, why would I do that? That's so ridiculous. I was still waking up, I think. But even though I have had that bad experience, I do enjoy indirect damage as a mechanic. I think it's good. I think it's good in draft. I think it's good in constructed. On average, games felt mid-rangey. And non-leader pilots, big asterisks there, non-leader pilots I felt like were a good gamble. Removal was good enough in this set so that... yes, it was very strong to put a pilot on a ship of yours, absolutely. But there was good enough removal that it was also a big risk. It was a very high risk, high reward play that you had to make that calculation to find out if that was right for you, or to just play your pilot as a unit, right? And that sort of diversifies you a little bit. Because if you put it on one of your ships and they can't deal with that, you might just run away with the game, right? But if you put it on one of your ships and they can deal with it, you've just 2-for-1 yourself, right? That's sort of the downside with upgrades in any game. So those are the big upsides of Jump to Lightspeed, and they were big upsides. You know, it didn't feel like a massively grindy or like hyper aggro format. It felt very mid-rangey, but the reason it felt mid-rangey, and we all know this, is because of the pilot leaders. Pilots flipping on 5 and 6, usually, most of the best ones. They were way too strong, and whenever you flipped one, the game was usually determined within a turn or two, which is why games weren't that grindy. They didn't usually go that late, because the pilot leaders usually just closed at the game, right? Straight out. The format also seemed like somewhat straightforward, and the leader balance wasn't great. Like, I think that most people would agree that Luke was the best draft leader. I think at pre-release you could have Boba, or I guess if you open the showcase, but in general that didn't happen, and I would say that most people would agree that Luke is the best leader in this format. And yeah, it felt somewhat straightforward to me. It was very clear what you needed to do kind of at every point. You need to control the board of vehicles so that your opponent either can't flip or it makes it very inconvenient for them to flip. And then once you're able to do that, you just hopefully aggro down the base. So you just draft every piece of like ship removal, even out of aspect in some cases. On this channel, quite a bit talked about the fact that I would play direct hit off aspect like regularly, specifically for Luke, because if I had the initiative going into the turn, I could just direct hit whatever the best ship is for 6, even if I had to pay it for 6. But obviously I would like to pay it for 4. The removal was good, which was nice. Between this, I think Out the Airlock was in this set, and there were some cool things you could do with Eject as well. But yeah, overall, I think everyone kind of is aware of the fact that pilot leaders were too strong, and for the most part, once a pilot leader was on a ship, it was very, very difficult to deal with that, and usually would just close out the game. So it's pretty important to just control your opponent's board until you can flip a leader and they can't, and then once that happens, they usually just can't rebuild, because your massive ship can now just pretty easily eat whatever small thing they play if you choose to do that, or you can just keep going face. So that, I think, is why I have Jump to Lightspeed at the bottom here, just because I thought that pilots were a very fun and interactive mechanic. Pilot leaders, I think, were not. They're just too sticky and too strong. Next, we have Twilight of the Republic. I only have one card here. So I've kind of put like an important card in the format on each slide and what I think is the best leader on each format. And I don't think most of my leader picks are controversial, but I think one of them might be. So yeah, direct hit is just a very important card here. This is the best leader. I'm not even going to talk about an important card for Twilight. I'm just going to talk about the best leader. And if you disagree with me on this one, look, I love like, discussion and disagreement, what is it? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis kind of thing. But I will have none of that with Twilight of the Republic. I'm going to start with the cons, actually. Anakin. Anakin is way too good. We all know this. This set is actually really fun for draft. But Anakin it's a common, and it is format warping. If you have Anakin, you are playing Anakin. And it's just as simple as that. I saw some stores, whenever they hosted Twilight drafts, would replace Anakin. Some did it with Ahsoka. Just like if you got Anakin, you actually just had Ahsoka instead. A system that I kind of think would maybe be cool is if you do draft Anakin, yay, congratulations, you're awesome, you drafted Anakin, you can swap that for any other leader. So like, you can get any other Twilight of the Republic leader in place of Anakin, but you can't play Anakin. I think that would be a fine system as well. It's kind of like a wild card leader, right? But as it stands, this leader is just ridiculous. I mean, it's great and constructed, we all know this. And some leaders are great and constructed for reasons that are not as important in limited. Han 2, quite famously, right? Anakin is like a somewhat rare case of a leader where the ability is very strong in both constructed and limited. Anyway, I've talked enough about the cons here. Let me talk about what I like about Twilight. One other thing is the aspect balance wasn't amazing. Even ignoring Anakin, I think heroism was kind of a little bit better for the most part in the leader pool and just sort of the general card pool. That's not to say villainy was unplayable. I don't think that this was like a insane unbalance, but it was not irrelevant. So pros, I think exploit is a cool mechanic, and so is coordinate. I think exploit and coordinate are both cool mechanics, and I think that they both work way better in draft than they did in constructed, especially exploit. In constructed, coordinate has like one good card, Plo Koon, right? I don't know if exploit has any. I think there's like a fringe Dooku deck somewhere. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. I think they are both very cool mechanics in draft, and because what I was talking about earlier with synergy, drafting a synergistic exploit deck is very strong and not easy to do, but it is something you can do if you really kind of think about what you're doing, and that's something that I really like. So definitely, there's a lot to sink your teeth into with like a Twilight draft if you just kind of pretend that Anakin isn't in it. There's a lot of nuance and fun to be had here. I would definitely have this probably higher up, but I have to include the whole format. So unfortunately, here he is. Next, we have Shadows of the Galaxy. I think the best leader for this was Cad Bane. Let's talk about some pros. So Smuggle is a cool mechanic in draft. When you're making your resource decision at the beginning of every turn, it's usually right to just resource the Smuggle card, right? Sometimes you're like really forced with difficult choices. It's like, oh, if I kind of want both of these, but if I know I need to resource one, and that means it's not coming back. Whereas Smuggle kind of gives you that bit of an out. It's like, yeah, okay, I have to resource one of these cards and I want both of them, but I actually can get this one back later, maybe for a bit more of a cost, but like, that's fine. You can still get it back. So it helps sort of smooth out your resources in a way that I really like in Limited. Sometimes you just get these weird, awkward draws that make you resource cards that you would really rather play. And I think that Smuggle helps sort of smooth out that variance for you and let you, play more of your deck. And I like that. I think that this was like a reasonably balanced format. There were a couple of leaders that were like pretty clearly stronger. I think Cad and Rey were the two big ones. But I think that like, even though they were, I think that, and most ping leaders in draft tend to be pretty good. I think that the actual balance of the format was more than fine. There were a lot of strategies viable as well. You could do an aggro deck. You could do like kind of a mid-rangey deck. You could do like a slower deck with someone like Rey. I think that the format it was very open. You could do a lot of stuff. It didn't force you to like build a hyper aggro pile or anything like that. Cons is that, yeah, sometimes they could feel a little bit grindy, especially in those matchups where one player is playing Ray and another player is playing some other slow leader. And yeah, now the games, you would get halfway through game 2 when time is called. And that's not necessarily a knock to the format. That might just be, people being like not quite as familiar with all the cards, and that's fine. But still, it's definitely worth mentioning. The Underworld faction was far better than the Mandalorian faction, I would say, which were the sort of the two main factions. I think that whenever you're going to do a set that has like these two main factions that are like, the one representing for the most part the good guys and the one representing for the most part the bad guys, it's kind of nice to have them like pretty equally power leveled, but maybe that's just a flavor preference that I have. It did definitely feel like the Mandalorians were not weak. Their sort of leader, I believe, was Bo-Katan, and she was fine. But I think Cad Bane was just quite a bit better. And then also most of the Underworld synergies and cards were just better too, with a few exceptions. Next, at number 3, we have Legends of the Force, which it hurts me to put this one this low. I want to put it higher because this is the one I have drafted the most. I've drafted this set a lot of times, and this is the set that I went to the limited PQ for. This is a set that I've like seriously like, thought about in like a competitive sense where I've actually, looked at all these cards and their synergies and limited like a little bit more deeply than other ones as well. But I do think that there are some glaring flaws with it. But let's start with the pros. Again, I think Talzin is the best leader in this set. I think that she's not like by far the best leader in the set, but I think she is the best leader. So some pros, there are very powerful units in this set at common in some cases. Terentatek is a card that I have on screen right now. It is at common, it is very strong, and it's not alone. There are a lot of other common strong units. There are also a lot of uncommon strong units. It is a very high power level set. The units are very good. But the removal is also quite good. So it can kind of help balance that out, and I like that. I like it when the cards I play feel impactful, but there are answers to when my opponent plays also impactful cards. And they have answers to my cards too, right? I like that. There was oftentimes kind of a risk-reward evaluation in this set. Lightsabers were kind of a theme here. They were, for the most part, quite good. But there was always kind of a bit of a thing where if you were able to play a lightsaber on your turn 1 play, you were probably just going to run away with that game. But like I was talking about with non-leader pilots earlier, there is a huge risk that your opponent will have Crushing Blow or some other way to deal with that. Usually Crushing Blow was the most efficient way to deal with a lightsabered up 2-drop, right? So you had to kind of consider that possibility. But there were lots of ways to deal with equipment on non-leaders. So there was that evaluation that needed to happen, which I liked a lot. It was also a little bit slower, which made decisions feel a bit more impactful, and like there was more nuance in sort of these longer games, whereas in a hyper fast format, your decisions are you play your efficient 2-drop and then you turn it sideways going towards base, right? But this was a little bit slower, so it made a bit more nuance in some of these decisions, which I liked a lot. The cons of this format is that the good leader pool is pretty limited, unfortunately. There's definitely a few good leaders. Like it is spread across, heroism and villainy. There are good leaders in villainy. There are good leaders in heroism. The good leader pool, it is somewhat limited, and every now and then, and I have personal experience with this in the top 8 draft at the limited PQ I went to for here, I was stuck with Snoke, who is a very good leader, Rey and Kylo, who are both very bad, unplayable leaders in draft. Virtually unplayable. In hindsight, the pool that I ended up getting, I probably should have drafted Kylo Yellow, but that's neither here nor there. I drafted Snoke Blue. But the good leader pool is very limited, and if you whiff on that, you are at a pretty big disadvantage. Getting one of the big 3 is very important. That is Talzin, Kenobi, and Snoke. If you don't get one of the big 3, you can sometimes make it through with Kanan, sometimes with Grand Inquisitor or Reva, or sometimes Cal. I'm probably missing 1 or 2 that were also fine, but yeah, you really wanted one of those big 3 leaders, and I think that is a problem. I think that not every leader needs to be good in draft. I understand that some leaders are intended for constructed, but I think that having like a good portion of your common leaders being good for draft is probably a good goal to have going forward. Also, this is my least favorite part of this format, is that going first is very, very important. I don't think that the force is a bad mechanic. I kind of like it, but I think that it does have one pretty major flaw, especially in draft, which is that if you are not going first and your opponent has kind of the right mindset and the right cards, they can just kind of keep you off the force, which can really ruin a lot of your game plan, right? The two of the three best leaders, right, Talzin and Kenobi, rely on the force to use their ability, their action. And if they can't do that, that's a real problem. And they're not, it's not just leaders. There are lots of cards that reference using the force. And if you're not able to do that, then oftentimes your game plan just feels like it's just not even getting off the ground at all. Like you just have kind of a non-game. So many times, if I were on the play, what I would be trying really hard to do is pretty good 2-drop that has the force trait into Maz Kanata on turn 2, to attack into whatever their turn 1 play is. Kill it, mine survives, I get the force, I have a 2, a 3, and I action condensed, so I'm going to get the initiative going into turn 3 as well. That kind of play is completely contingent on me having the initiative. Now, that's still a strong play if I don't have the initiative, but usually by then my opponent has gotten the opportunity to get the force, and then that can help sort of start their game plan moving. Whereas if I'm on the play and I do that, they don't have the force, I have 2 units, they have 0, they're going to play 1. I still have the initiative. I have the force, they don't. They have no way of getting it, and they're just playing catch up. And that is pretty much entirely based on the coin flip. Now, I'm describing a pretty specific scenario where I have a 2-cost force unit and then Maz Kanata, and it won't always be like that. But even without Maz Kanata, there's a lot of 2/4s in the format. Night Sister Warrior was it was a good card that saw a lot of play, and that's a 2/2. So oftentimes I will just attack into that, kill their 2/2 with my 2/4. I have the force, they don't, they get to draw a card, we go next, right? Yeah, I don't know. Overall, though, I did really enjoy this set. I know I've just trash-talked it a lot, and maybe if I wasn't so biased, it would be like a level lower or something like that, but I do still really enjoy this set. There was some very cool stuff you could do with it, and it did feel like a lot of your decisions were very impactful and a lot of games were very close. Next up, we have Secrets of Power. This one, it's still a bit early. I've only drafted it a couple times, but it's shaping up to be really interesting. I've been enjoying my time drafting it a lot. So a couple things. Disclose is a very fun draft challenge in the draft portion, the deck building portion, and in the play portion. There are a lot of Disclose cards that are really bad if you can't play the Disclose costs. In fact, most of them are. And whether you can pay the Disclose costs or not, a lot of that is based on how your deck is built, which is based on the draft portion. So it's sort of like a full day thing. Setting up Disclose. It's your draft, your deck build, and your play. And then during the play, of course, you need to figure out which cards to keep so you can do the Disclose thing. Even if you don't have the Disclose card in your hand, but you know that you might draw it, maybe you'll keep things differently based on that. Giving your opponents information is always relevant, of course, the actual act of disclosing. I think Disclose is a very fun mechanic. I'm enjoying it a lot, and I hope it comes back, not right away, but I hope it does come back at some point. I think that it is a very cool mechanic for draft and probably constructed too. I'm not sure. A lot of strategies do seem to be viable. Again, a little bit early. It might come out that, like a control is the best archetype or something, and then I'll eat those words. But for now, it does seem like a lot of strategies are viable. Plot is good, but abundant. And what I mean by that is that everybody will have access to it, and you'll often have options, and that's maybe good. It's sort of like what I was saying earlier about bombs being fine if there's interaction to deal with them. And if everyone can kind of have the bombs and the interaction. So the plot is kind of the same thing. If everyone can have it and everyone can have a way to deal with it, it's probably fine. There should be kind of an asterisk beside that about whether that's a pro or a con. Time will tell. The flip turns are more interesting than JTL as well, because in JTL you flip your leader onto a unit, and now that unit is massive and unkillable and closing out the game. But most of the time when you flip your leader in Secrets of Power, you are going to have a pretty big explosive turn because you're going to plot something cool out, but that is all of your resources for that turn, and also it's usually not going to make your leader massive and unkillable unless you play something like Unveiled Might, in which case, yeah, There also seems to be one of the biggest mix of playable leaders so far. There are a couple that I would say are like the best for sure. I think Leia is the best leader still. But I think Yularen is very strong. I think Deidre is very strong. And I think Slimeore, weirdly, is very strong. I think there's a lot of really good leaders in this set, and I'm excited to get more practice with more of them. Problems, my biggest problem is that removal, like event removal, is bad. And units are excellent. And that is, like I was talking about earlier, if units are excellent and there's no way to deal with them, that's kind of a problem. And I know that their design philosophy, from what I've heard, is that they're trying to make it so that you deal with the units with your units, which is good. And I like that. If that's the design philosophy they want to go with, then that makes sense. But currently, it doesn't really feel like, maybe I'm just building my decks wrong, but it doesn't really feel like I have ways to deal with some of the units like I would have in other formats. And because just the removal is just, it's horrible for the most part. There's a couple of good pieces of removal, but it's mostly just not good at all. Also, turn 1 seems to be more important than usual. Turn 1 seems to be more important than usual. I haven't quite figured out why that is yet. Hopefully, as the format gets a little older and I play it a few more times, I'll have a better answer for y'all. But I think it might have something to do with just the general quality of units. It feels a little bit harder to come back if your opponent has, there's the 3/3 at common, the Imperial Dark Trooper, maybe. And if they play that and you play like a 2/3, obviously that's really rough, and that will happen sometimes. That might have something to do with it, but I think it just has to do with overall unit quality. That turn 1 is very important. You need to be playing the best possible thing on turn 1. Overall, though, the format is really fun so far. Like I said, I really like Disclose the mechanic. Good balance of leaders. Big fan of this. Very excited to really sink my teeth into it. I think I'm scheduled to go to 2 limited PQs right now. Maybe possibly a third one. I'm not 100% sure yet. But I'm very excited to draft this in a more competitive environment. Well, that's a bit presumptuous, assuming I make the top 8, which I might not. Either way, I'm excited to play the sealed version of this, which I will get to do in a competitive environment, guaranteed. And first place, if you're using process of elimination, you've already figured it out. But I think it's Spark of the Rebellion. And this is a hot take. I think Jyn Erso is the best leader for draft in Spark of the Rebellion. Some people think it's Tarkin, and I'm sympathetic to that. Tarkin is very strong. But I've had a lot of success with Jyn. I have heard some people say that they agree with me on Jyn, though. So pros, there's a lot of viable leaders. So like I said, Jyn and Tarkin are very strong, but Krennic is quite good. Leia, of course, is quite good. Sabine is quite good. Even IG-88 is actually like an alright draft leader. Obviously, Boba's a great draft leader. Thrawn is fine. Han is not actually amazing in draft, despite being like arguably the best constructed leader right now. But yeah, you get to play banned Boba Fett. So that's cool. So a lot of viable leaders, and a lot of them are at common, which is great. I think that that means that pretty much everyone will have an opportunity to have at least one really good leader. And you ideally want more than one, so you have a bit of flexibility in where you go. One from heroes and one for villainy. There are a lot of viable strategies. This set really does feel like the most well thought out set, and it probably is, right? I mean, it's the first set of the game. They had, I don't know how long to figure out this set specifically as the launch for their game. It makes sense that they would put the most possible effort into it. Not to say the other sets feel rushed or hasty or anything, but you can really tell that this one had a special amount of love given to it. The strategies are all, there's a lot of viable ones depending on your pool and what leaders you picked, right? Like if you want to do an aggro deck, a rebel aggro deck with Leia, that's absolutely viable. If you want to do like a mid-rangey Imperial deck with Tarkin, that's also very viable. The gameplay, and I put this as a pro, it feels very streamlined. Like I was saying a minute ago, it just, it feels like this set was everything was very intentional. And I think that's good. I think that makes a game experience feel better. This is what I was talking about with March of the Machine, with exciting sort of bomby cards, very good legendaries and rares, which were abundant. Insofar as you can open a legendary and rare, countered by good interaction. So it in later sets, like in Secrets of Power, Krennic, objectively, the new one, the 9 cost 810 Sentinel with some extra text about drawing cards, is cool. It's a strong card if you can play it in draft. Now, that's if you can play it. I don't think it's like a good card. It's not one you should draft, but like objectively, once it's on the field, it is a strong card. But like that doesn't feel quite as exciting because of just kind of how it sits and the hoops you had to jump through to get there and the payoff that it gets you. Whereas like slamming a Vader and then like looking through your deck and whatever from Spark of the Rebellion, or slamming a Luke and dealing with their biggest threat and now they have like some big thing to deal with, or those are the two big ones, I guess. U-Wing Reinforcement as well is a pretty cool bomb. They felt really fun to play, but they didn't feel bad, right? Like if your opponent plays a Vader in Spark of the Rebellion, there's a really good chance you just have like a takedown or something like that you can deal with it, or an open fire that you can deal with it. There's a decent amount of removal in the set, which sort of balances that. Now, that doesn't make Vader not good. He still gets 2-for-1 value, but it doesn't make it feel unbeatable either, right? So, like I say here, the rares and legendaries were exciting, but they were countered with these good interactions. Now, speaking of good interaction, let's get into the cons of this set, which is just Overwhelming Barrage, really. This card is a problem. This is I talk a big game about liking good interaction. There's a limit, though. There's a limit to how good the interaction can be. And Overwhelming Barrage was so good that I think that to this day it is still, and I don't really think it's that close, the strongest limited card in this game. There are a lot of good limited cards in this game. I think Overwhelming Barrage is still by quite a bit the strongest. It was an uncommon, so you would see it pretty regularly, and you would take it out of aspect. I don't know if you would take it double out of aspect. I didn't draft the set enough times to know that. I'm guessing no, but you would play this for 7 happily. And if you ever got to play this for 5, GG, just shake my hand, right? Game's over. Maybe if it was a higher rarity would feel a little better because you wouldn't see it as often. But just in general, I think that this card maybe... Now, I understand that it's not like... It's very strong in Constructed. It's not too good for Constructed. But yeah, this is a kind of card that warps the format in Limited. It usually just felt like a one-sided board wipe that also made your biggest unit get in for a little bit of extra damage as well. Like, just way too good for draft, I think. But other than that, that's like my other minor complaint that I wrote down here is that I only got to draft it a few times because of the supply issues. And then once the supply issues were resolved, we were, multiple sets ahead and everyone wanted to draft the new sets, myself included, for PQ practice and other, just because it's a new set, I need the new cards. But I hope one day I'm able to draft this set another time because it was very fun. Other than the Overwhelming Barrage problem. But that's okay. You just have to draft all the Overwhelming Barrages so no one else can. It's great. Well, Spark the Rebellion is my number 1 pick for my favorite draft set that this game has had to offer so far. So, final thoughts. Like I said, I've enjoyed every set. The difference between my number 1 and my number 6 is actually not that big. I really enjoyed Spark the Rebellion. I really enjoyed Jump to Lightspeed, and all the sets in between. I am very excited. I know I've talked about this a lot, but I am very excited about the inclusion of limited PQs. To me, that really signals that FFG is actually serious about limited as a game mode whenever they're treating the big limited tournaments with the sort of same seriousness that they treat their big constructed tournaments. I think that sort of may attract different people to the game. I know there's people in my sort of local scene that mostly only come out to limited events, and there's people in my local scene that mostly only come out to constructed events. And then there's people that come out to both limited and constructed events. And sometimes people get drawn from one to the other as well, and that's great. So genuinely, I'm very happy that FFG is taking draft seriously. Mark Rosewater, one of the higher ups at Magic, a few years back talked about the change from their draft boosters to their play boosters. And it always kind of stuck with me because the way he talked about draft, the way that he talked about it was that he said that people were not super happy with play boosters as a concept, especially longtime drafters. And his answer to that was that if they didn't do that, then draft probably just as a concept would just have to go away because it wasn't profitable enough. And that's because before play boosters, Magic had a thing called set boosters, which were like slightly better value draft boosters for a little bit more money. And since Wizards, of course, they could charge more money for basically the same product that was just like a little bit better, then why would they be printing these draft boosters anymore, right? So they sort of tried to consolidate them into one, but it ended up working fine. I do miss the old draft boosters, that extra comment, am I right? But just the way that he talked about it, it made it seem like draft was like very secondary for Wizards of the Coast as a format, which is unfortunate to hear. And since then, they've made good draft sets, don't get me wrong, but still, I think I really applaud FFG for taking draft as a format very seriously in a way that I don't think that Wizards maybe does. Carbonite draft, question mark? This is just sort of in terms of ranking draft formats, I think it would be cool to also rank Carbonite draft formats, but I'm not rich enough to do that. I've only done one Carbonite draft, and it was because I got an excellent deal. But I will say, if you get an opportunity to do it, it actually is pretty fun. I did a Carbonite draft of Jump to Lightspeed, and the deck was ridiculous. Everybody's deck was ridiculous. I'm not going to say ridiculously good. Just to be clear, the power level of a Carbonite draft is actually lower than the power level of a regular draft. And the reason for that is a lot of the important draft sort of staples are at common and uncommon, and you see less of those in Carbonite packs. So it is still very fun, though. It's a cool deck building challenge, and obviously Carbonite packs are really fun to open. We all know that. So definitely give that a shot if you have an opportunity to do so. And also, start up a draft scene at your LGS, okay? It brings people in, it sells product, it gets people ready for PQs, okay? There's not enough draft scenes around, okay? There just isn't. So do that. Be the change of your LGS, okay? It's also, you get to brew ideas with people. No, it's awesome. And genuinely, as always, I really want to hear your thoughts about your favorite draft sets. Do you agree with my list? Would you change any of them? You probably would. You probably don't exactly agree with my list. That would be crazy. Do you think that I'm completely off base with any of them? Did I forget something? Genuinely, I would love to hear it. Anything that gets me better at limited, okay, I'm down for. You can tear me apart, roast me in there. Just make me better at limited, okay? I heard you're pretty strong. I gotta cut that out. I've never seen Dragon Ball. And lastly, happy holidays. It is December 11th when I'm recording this, and Christmas and other winter holidays are right around the corner. So enjoy that. Hopefully there are some cool Star Wars related goodies in your future. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, like and subscribe. Wait, that's not what I say. May the Force be with you.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?